What I'd like to do is just start with, kind of how I got to where I am today. And, a lot of people assume that if you're in politics, you've kind of been doing this your whole life. And, I grew up in a political family. My mom was actually the mayor of Charlotte for a couple terms, and she was also a member of Congress for like 18 years or something like that. So I did grow up in a political family, but I never, ever wanted to get involved in politics. I think any kid that grew up, how many of you grew up in political families? Raise your hand if you have politics in your family. God, y'all are a blessed group. I tell you what, that's amazing. If you have, then you realize, I don't want anything to do with that. That's not the way I want to order my life, for sure. It's tough on your spouse, it's tough on your kids, all those kind of things. So I grew up in the church and, grew up my whole life going to church. And believe it or not, now looking back on it, I could say maybe I grew up in dead churches. Maybe I didn't hear the gospel. Maybe the gospel was being preached and my ears really weren't open to it. I don't know what the situation is looking back on it. I remember a lot of stories. I remember being bored in church. I remember all that kind of stuff. But when I was 17 years old, I moved to Columbia, South Carolina from Charlotte. I moved down to live with my dad and really to play football, because there was a good football school down there called Irmo High School, and I wanted to have the opportunity to go to college to play ball. So I went down to do that, and while I was there, my dad didn't go to church, my stepmother didn't go to church, but I started going to this Baptist church down the road by myself, mostly on Wednesday nights, because that was kind of the youth service, and then on Sundays as well. And many of you probably had this experience before, where for weeks on end, the preacher is looking at you and preaching to you. Every message he preaches is directed towards you. And so there was obviously this movement going on inside of me, really being called to God. And I went down and talked to the pastor about it and committed my life to Christ at the time. But then I went off to college and I just kind of walked away. I wandered away, and I did the same stuff that every college kid would do that doesn't know the Lord. And my life was fun, but a mess at the same time. Spiritually, I wasn't really close to God. And then I went out and I met my wife, who I've been married to now for 25 years, and we started having kids pretty young. I was actually still in college in architecture school in Charlotte, and we started having kids, and our lives were really, in a lot of ways, growing in separate directions. She was kind of in the business world, working for First Union, and I was in the architecture world, and our lives were moving in different directions, but we were pursuing the career path. And I remember there was a time where our lives were really not too good. Our marriage wasn't that great. We really weren't that close to each other. We never fought. We never argued, any of that kind of stuff, but we really didn't have the best marriage in the world. And at that point in time, that was around September of 1996, Billy Graham did a crusade in Charlotte. Y'all remember that? Any of you remember the Billy Graham crusade, September 96? Well, we decided that my mom had tickets. She was, a member of Congress. She had tickets, and we said, we're going to go to the Billy Graham crusade. And Alice said she really wanted to go. My wife's name is Alice. And so we went, and we sat up in just under the upper deck. It was a brand new stadium at the time. The Charlotte Panther Stadium had just opened up. And we're sitting under the upper deck, and it's raining. This was youth night, if any of you were there. It was raining that night, and we're sitting under this downspout, and it was broken. Literally, the pipe, all the water's piped, but this one was not piped, and water was pouring down literally on our heads. I mean, we were soaking wet, and it was and Billy Graham got up to speak, and we couldn't hear a word he was saying. I mean, this is just like Satan. This is the way he works, right? The guy gets up to speak, and you can't hear a word he's saying. And so my wife said, you know what, I really want to hear what he's saying, so let's go inside and listen. We're kind of that club level, so we walked inside, freezing cold, air conditioned, soaking wet, and she just starts bawling. And she said, I want to go down to the field. And so I grabbed her hand. We both kind of think we're Christians at the time, so grabbed her hand and we walked. I took her down to the field, and she accepted Christ there at the Billy Graham crusade. Well, her life just kind of took off. Her spiritual life took off, and she started studying the Bible. She started reading the Bible. She's going to multiple Bible studies. She started hanging out with Christian women. Everything just kind of started changing, and I was on the outside really looking in to her life. And at one point, she was doing this Kay Arthur Bible study. If you're familiar with Kay Arthur, Kay goes really deep, really fast. And I remember this very vividly now, as if it was yesterday or last night. I'm laying on the sofa in our living room, and she comes home from this Kay Arthur Bible study just as excited as she can be about death. I mean, who gets excited about death and dying and the next life, eternity with God? And I remember sitting up on the sofa And God was working in my life, obviously, at this time, too. But I remember sitting up on the sofa, and I looked at her, and I said, honey, I don't have what you have. I don't have what you have. And I knew it. I knew it at the depth of my soul that I did not have what she had, because I was scared of death. Death did not excite me at all. Right? Not that we're supposed to get excited about the process of death, but we're supposed to be really excited about what comes after. And so that was really a pivotal point in time in my life, to where God had, we used to think that, Alice and I used to talk about this, that God had this calendar, that there would be these days where you would meet 4 or 5 different people and they'd all say the same Bible verse to you, in completely different places, or you'd hear the same phrases from different people in just odd places around your day. And we say, does God have a calendar or something where everybody's supposed to say the same thing to you? But that's the way it was working in our life. Everywhere we went, people were speaking into us biblical truth everywhere. And it was, looking back, it was bizarre. It was really kind of strange. And at that point in time, I committed my life to Christ. My life was pretty much a mess. I was living in a lot of different kinds of sins that I wanted to get rid of. I got down on my knees and I just said, Lord Jesus, I give it all to you. Just for the first time in my life. I mean, even when I was in high school, I never really said that. I may have felt guilty about my sins. I may have not liked my sins. I may have not wanted God to judge me for my sins, but I had never really repented of my sins before. I'd never gotten down on my face before the Lord and said, I'm going this way, Lord. I want to turn and go that way. I want to follow you. I'm going to commit it all to you. And I did that at that point in time. And so the Lord just absolutely blessed our lives as a married couple. And we had opportunity after opportunity. We got involved in this group called Charlotte Leadership Forum, where there was 4 older men. And I would actually encourage anybody in this group that has a passion for young men to think about doing this. 4 older men that had been meeting together just in a breakfast group for a number of years, about 16 years I think it was. And they really felt called to pour their lives into the next generation, younger men. And so they started this group called Charlotte Leadership Forum, and they said, we're going to get 20, 25 young men together, and we are going to spend a couple years with them doing discipleship, walking alongside them, and just speaking into their lives and giving back. And so they started this group, and I was in the first class. Now, I snuck into this class actually before I was a believer. This happened about the same time the Billy Graham crusade happened. These guys came along, and because of my mom, they said, do you want to be a part of this Charlotte Leadership Forum thing? Young Christian men were going to get together. And I'm thinking, great networking opportunity. I'm going to go meet other Christian men. I'm going to have this opportunity to help build my business and all this kind of stuff. But little did I know, for the next 2 years of my life, God was going to be reconstructing my heart. And that's really what happened over those 2 years, is those men, not just those men, but other speakers and people all over the community of Charlotte started pouring into my life. And really, for somebody that grew up in perhaps a Christian home, but not really having, my dad wasn't a Christian and that sort of thing, so I didn't have a dad to look to as to what it meant to follow Christ. And these men were just these living examples, shining examples of what it truly looks like to follow Jesus Christ in work, in the family, and all these kind of things. And so for 2 years, we went through that process, and it was life transforming. And so fast forward a little bit, when I really felt called to run for lieutenant governor, and we moved to Raleigh. We actually started a leadership forum in Raleigh as well. For 10 years, we had 20 young men and their wives. It became a couples thing, actually, and 40 people, 20 couples over a 2-year period. We did that for 10 years in Raleigh and really transformed a lot of families' lives. My point earlier was, if there are men in here that are feeling that calling, you will never see anything so transformational in your life as to pouring into couples like that over a couple-year period of time. And if anybody wants to do that, come see me. I mean, we kind of have a playbook for how it works, and it's a lot of work and it's effort and all that kind of stuff, but it's very doable. So anyway, moved to Raleigh and feel the calling to get engaged in government. I'm an architect. I'm sitting there going, you know what? Does it really matter if we're designing beautiful buildings and we're doing all this work from an architectural standpoint if my world around me is falling apart? You've heard that line before, what do you say when your kids grow up and say, hey, Dad, where were you when everything was going down, when everything was falling apart? And I really felt called to jump in. And I started seeking kind of wise biblical counsel on this as to, what I should do, what I should run for. I didn't really feel like running for the state house or the state senate or anything else. So I said, I'm going to run for statewide office. and wise counsel, including Paul Newby, was one of the first people. I think Paul may have been the first or second person I actually ever talked to about this. He said, you should run for lieutenant governor. And everybody I talked to, this is kind of the way the Lord works. Everybody I talked to said, you should run for lieutenant governor. It's a good starting off point. And so we jumped into the race. I left my job behind. I left my salary. I left my benefits. I left everything I knew about the world behind and said, God, if you want me to do this, I'm all in. I'm not leaving myself an escape strategy here or a fallback strategy. I am all in. And so really, I guess in a way, testing God and what I believed was the calling he had placed on my life. And so there we were. A couple years later, we won. We won the office for lieutenant governor, only the second Republican in 100 and something years to win that race. And it was against all odds. In fact, when I got into the race for lieutenant governor, Walter Dalton, who later got out of the lieutenant governor race because he ran for governor, Beverly Perdue dropped out and he started running for governor. When I got in, I was running against an incumbent, a sitting lieutenant governor. And so again, if you want to see how the Lord orchestrates the things around you for his purposes, you can look into that race, and I could tell you a million different stories about that. Not to say that I'm anything special. There's nothing special about me at all, and I think that God establishes leaders in government, and he deposes leaders in government. He puts them in and he takes them out for his purposes. Again, not that I'm special in any way. That he has just chosen to use me for such a time as this in North Carolina right now. And looking back on it, not in a million years did I ever think we would be up against things like the marriage amendment, or up against things like the Charlotte bathroom ordinance, HB2, House Bill 2, if you will. Never imagined that. And what we find in North Carolina today, and I'll talk about this if y'all want me to later, but what we find in North Carolina today is we are at the tip of the spear on this issue. The issue related to HB2 and the Charlotte bathroom ordinance is not about North Carolina, it's not about Charlotte, it's not about transgender men or women using the bathroom of their choice. It's about radically redefining how much of our culture operates in America today. And so it is while it's a hot topic issue, it's one of those things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. A lot of people would say, oh, this is bad for business for North Carolina. Whatever it happens to be, we are at the tip of that spear. And either we fight it or we give in to the administration in Washington, D.C., who is literally trying to, they said it, fundamentally transform America by doing one specific thing that we never would have imagined ever happening. In the Charlotte ordinance, and this is something that you'll never hear in the media doesn't tell you about this, their ordinance says that you have to take male and female signs, men and women signs off of bathrooms, off of changing rooms, and off of showers. The media, I was on Fox News this morning and I said that, and immediately Twitter blew up and all the people that opposed me on this started calling me a liar. So we had to post the ordinance again. We had to show them where we are actually telling the truth, that it actually does say that it's called sex discrimination if you put male and female on a bathroom or a changing facility or a little girl's locker room, and basically allowing men to walk in girls' women's restrooms, showers, changing rooms. How many of you guys think that's okay? I mean, there may be some of you who think it's okay. I haven't found anybody yet, but I would imagine that somebody obviously thinks that's okay to allow that to happen. So when you hear this talk about discrimination, and our bill doesn't say anything about LGBT, it doesn't say anything about transgender, it's not even mentioned in the bill, but it was brought up by the media the day after as the most anti-LGBT discriminatory legislation in the history of the United States. All we did was codify what existed prior to the Charlotte bathroom ordinance. The laws in North Carolina are still the same today, saying you can have men's room and women's room signs on your bathrooms. Government, you have to do that. Businesses, you can do whatever you want. The Charlotte ordinance said, Charlotte businesses, you have to take down those signs. We said, Charlotte businesses, you can do whatever you choose to do. So if you're like a Target and they say we want to have an inclusive bathroom policy, that's fine. Target was well within the law of even what we said was appropriate to do that. That's okay. That's called free market. That's Target deciding what's best for their customers and then their customers deciding what's best for them. That's okay. That's what we said. And so there is nothing in that bill about LGBT. There's nothing in that bill about transgender. But here's the thing that you don't hear. They call it discriminatory against less than 1% of the population, transgender, because this wasn't about LGBT, it was transgender specifically. They call it discrimination against the transgender community. Less than 1% of the population. What about the other 99%? What about the 99% of women and children who don't have a say in this at all? Because the national media doesn't give them a say, because the federal government doesn't give them a say. They're the ones truly being discriminated against. That's true discrimination. You are talking about 1% getting certain rights that the 99% don't have. They don't have the right to privacy anymore if this goes through. And so what the Justice Department said yesterday, they came and said that they were going to withhold about $4 billion from North Carolina. Education, transportation, housing, they were throwing it all out there. We're going to keep all this money because you're going against Title IX and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act from the 60s and 70s, when basically they're redefining sex. They're redefining what sex means. Back in the 60s and 70s, we were going through the Civil Rights Movement. The word sex had nothing to do with transgender or LGBT or anything else. Nothing. Zero to do with that. And so the Justice Department now in Washington, D.C. is saying, yeah, it actually does. And so that's the battle that we're fighting right now, is the battle to fundamentally transform America. And North Carolina's at the tip of that. So we appreciate your prayers. We're going to stand firm at our position because we believe this is important to North Carolina. And we believe it's fundamentally important to protect women and children. And then the other thing is just kind of the lies about the business community. This is both an ideological battle and a political battle at the same time, because there's a political campaign going on. I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but here's the ideology of it. So for the business community that does get frightened, and I've had many friends say, hey, back down on this, we're losing business in North Carolina. There has been no record of a number of businesses that have said we are leaving, we're pulling out. There's no doubt there's an impact to the C-suite across the country. If companies are thinking about moving North Carolina, there's nobody that's going to recommend probably to their CEO that they pick North Carolina right now. That's real. We get that. If you're in the development world, the development business, I get that. I'm an architect. I certainly understand that. But like the PayPal issue, that's the one. PayPal's the one. Deutsche Bank is a completely different story. They really weren't expanding anyway. They used that as an opportunity to make a statement. But PayPal, here's how you know it's both political and ideological. Our law in North Carolina is the same as 28 other states and the federal government. Very similar laws, 28 other states and the federal government. If we were truly discriminatory, first of all, PayPal wouldn't have come here to begin with because nothing changed before and after. And so that's one case. The other one, they'd pull out of those other 28 states also. They'd have to say, we can't do business in those 28 states. We can't do business with the federal government because they have similar laws. But more importantly, they would certainly not be doing business with Saudi Arabia and Sudan and Yemen, in places where the LGBT community is not only persecuted, it's executed, right? So if it was truly ideological, that's what you'd hear from PayPal. We're no longer going to do business in Saudi Arabia. So that's how you know what it is. And the same things happened in Houston. Last year, Houston was going through the same battle, and everybody said the NBA is going to pull out, the NCAA is going to pull out, business is going to pull out. Well, guess what? We just had the Final Four tournament in Houston just a couple months ago, right? Remember that Final Four in Houston, maybe last month? And they're building 20 million square feet of office space in downtown Houston right now. Business has not gone away from Houston. Business is not going to go away from North Carolina. And I'll give you just some facts and some things that you probably don't know, because again, the media chooses not to tell you. So I'll back up a little bit. Under our control, since we've been there, we've only been there 3 years. But since we took over, we have cut debt in North Carolina by about $3 billion, a little more than $3 billion. We have, first of all, we filled a gap. We had a shortfall when we took over 5 years ago of $3 billion and didn't raise your taxes. But since 3 years, we've cut debt by about $3 billion. We have cut your taxes, mostly income tax and sales tax, but we've cut your taxes by $4.5 billion. $4.5 billion. Cut income tax, personal and corporate. Corporate income tax has dropped in half. Personal income tax has dropped considerably. And imagine this, we cut personal income tax, and personal income tax revenues for the state of North Carolina have gone up. Why is that? Because we've created jobs. We've done it the right way. Revenues for personal income has actually gone up for the state of North Carolina. So we've cut your taxes by $4.5 billion. We've put $1.5 billion into the rainy day fund in North Carolina, so that if times get tight again, we are not going to have to start cutting teachers' pay and all that kind of stuff that the other folks did before we got there. We paid off $2.8 billion in federal debt to the unemployment insurance. 2.8, the third largest debt in the United States of America, owed to the federal government, was North Carolina. And we paid it off in record time. If you're a small business owner in here, that debt is on your back. Paid it off in record time. You should start now feeling relief from unemployment insurance. And then, that wasn't all. And the reason it's taken so long to really get it off your back is because we put $1 billion away in the rainy day fund for unemployment insurance, so we would never have that problem again with the United States government in paying our bills for unemployment. So another $1 billion. Now you can keep adding these up, and this gets into like $20 billion worth of good news economically for our state. North Carolina is the fastest growing state in the country. GDP numbers came out 2 weeks ago, and the fastest growing GDP in the United States, 13.4%. The United States is growing at 1.5. 13.4 in North Carolina. You guys have created 275,000 jobs in North Carolina, one of the fastest job growths per capita in the United States of America. Our unemployment has been cut in half in North Carolina. Forbes, Fortune, Site Selection Magazine. Site Selection Magazine just came out last week, just a few days ago, and said, for the second year running, North Carolina is ranked #1 best place to do business in the United States of America. Would you believe that by listening to the media today? You would think that we were already underground and they had been putting dirt on top of us, because you'd think it was over here. It's not. People are going to continue to come to North Carolina. Is this a blip on the radar with what's going on? Yes, it is. Of course it is. But you know what? Sometimes you have to suffer a little pain to get to the other side. And I believe if we get to the other side of this national dilemma and we actually win on this, I think North Carolina will reap bountiful rewards for being on the right side of this. I really do believe that. And so we're going to hold firm to that. And then on the to add to all the good things we've done, here's another thing you probably haven't heard: education. If you listen to the media, you listen to the radio, or read the newspaper, you would certainly believe that Republicans have been cutting education in North Carolina now ever since we've been in office. We have actually added $1.5 billion to K-12 education in the last 3 years. How many of you knew that? How many of you know we spend more on K-12 education in North Carolina now than we've ever spent in the history of our state? No, seriously, raise your hand if you know that. No, I mean seriously, raise your hand if you know that. Why do you not know? Ilario, I know you know, you better know that. Why do you not know this? Because the media doesn't want to tell you. Because they have a really nice narrative they're creating about how we are hurting the economy and how we're killing education. How many of you know that we gave teachers the largest raise in the United States of America last year here in North Carolina? There's one hand, there's two hands, there's maybe 10 hands went to go up out of this whole room. Unbelievable, isn't it? You don't know this? How many of you know that teachers are not leaving North Carolina in record numbers? In fact, it's just the opposite. Teachers are leaving North Carolina at 6.8%, right? They're leaving on the national level in urban areas at 18% and rural areas at 15%. North Carolina 16.8 or 6.8. And we recruit more teachers in North Carolina every year than we lose. You'd think, now, there are actually less students going through teaching colleges in our state. But the deans of those colleges will tell you it's because parents talk them out of teaching. Parents are talking their students out of going into the teaching profession. So we are actually doing our job on the side of raising teacher salaries and teacher pay, all this kind of stuff, putting more money into education. We're connecting the state of North Carolina. How many of you know we'll be the first state in the United States of America to have every single classroom connected to high-speed broadband? How many of you know that? By next year, by the end of this next school year, we will be the first state to have every single classroom connected. I took multiple trips up to D.C. to meet with the Federal Communications Commission to rewrite their rules to show them that North Carolina should be that bright shining star for connectivity in our country. And they said, you know what, you're already that far ahead, we're going to invest in it. So the state put about $12 million into it, and the feds put about $64 million into it. And that's why we're getting connected. So great success stories across the board. You guys should really be proud to be in North Carolina because the other states, I have friends that are governors and lieutenant governors around the country, and they will constantly ask me, how are you guys doing what you're doing in North Carolina? And I say it's because we have great representatives who really care about the people of North Carolina, and they're investing in North Carolina. We're doing the right things foundationally in North Carolina. But more importantly than that, I think it's because we have great people in North Carolina. Our greatest resources definitely are people. There is no doubt. I mean, you look at Ilario Pantano back there. Ilario dedicated his life for years to veterans in our state. We have one of the best veterans programs in the United States of America because of the hard work that Ilario has been doing over the last couple of years. And I could, yeah. And now he's a complete loser because he's leaving us and going and doing something else. But we're gonna miss Ilario. He's done great work. So that's really the story about what's going on. And I don't know if we have any time left, Bob, but I'll take maybe a question or two if there is. I know you guys have to get to work. But if anybody has a pressing question that they want to ask, I'll be happy to do my best to answer it. Anybody have one? If not, listen, we have one? Yes, sir.
Real quick on HB2, do you think that, like the marriage amendment, sadly ended up in the Supreme Court and feds basically took that over? Is that what's going to happen here? Is that what the Justice Department's goal is in bringing this suit against North Carolina, you think?
Yeah, that's the goal, is to let the federal district court make the selection. You know, we preempted their strike of a lawsuit. I think they were kind of taken by surprise. Both our governor and our legislature actually sued them before they could sue us. And so we have the lawsuit actually in the Eastern District Federal Court, which is right down the street. It's a block away from the governor's mansion, which is where it should be. Their lawsuit is actually in Greensboro, an hour and a half away from Raleigh, because it's a more liberal court and they'll get a more liberal judgment there. And so we hope that they will make the right decision. But certainly that's kind of the way it's going, right? And unless there's checks and balances in government, unless Congress does their job, at some point they step up and actually provide the check and balance that is supposed to be in place through our Constitution, then we're going to continue to see this happen. So Congress provides the funds for all these things that these agencies are saying they're going to take away from North Carolina. They're the provider of the funds. They're the ones that could actually stop this from happening as well. So hopefully they'll get engaged also. But yes, so thank you. So listen, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for allowing me to be here, and we hope to see you again soon. God bless you all.